I was certain that my dreams had been shattered beyond repair. But then he came into my life with 3 words that changed everything. Under My Protection, Part 1, Chapter 1. The darkest hour. The harsh fluorescent light of the office felt like a spotlight on my raw shame. You have a beautiful face, Aiko-chan, and a truly prodigious talent for dance. My former boss, Mr. Sato, said, leaning back in his leather chair, his smile never quite reaching his cold, greedy eyes. It's a pity we couldn't come to an understanding about extracurricular commitment. I stood rigid, my hands clenched so tightly my fingernails dug crescent shapes into my palms. I had refused him for months, putting off meetings and feigning illness, but my excuses had finally run out. My commitment is to the music, Sato-san, I managed, my voice shaking slightly. Sato sighed, a theatrical expression of disappointment. Idols sell dreams, Aiko, and dreams require investment. Investment requires returns. Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. Consider it a failure to meet the moral standards required of an idol. He leaned forward, enjoying the cruelty. And do read Article 6B. It's the part that prevents you from taking any similar job with any company for the next 5 years. You are talented, yes, but you are effectively radioactive now. Enjoy your early retirement. 5 years. My career, my life's ambition, extinguished at 21. All my years of preparation erased as if they had never happened. I had just lost everything for refusing to compromise my dignity. A wave of sick, helpless rage washed over me, but I kept my composure. I simply bowed low and walked out. I didn't cry in the office. I didn't cry on the train. I didn't cry when I stepped into my tiny, sterile apartment in the heart of Tokyo. I only cried later that night, huddled on the floor, the remnants of a cheap convenience store dinner forgotten. The contract clause wasn't just a hurdle, it was a cage, an absolute death sentence. My career was defined by my stage name, Aiko. The future was a vast, empty expanse of fear. I uncorked a cheap bottle of sake and took a long, burning swallow, collapsing against the wall. The despair was suffocating me. Then I heard my ringtone and the phone, discarded on the mat, lit up. I almost ignored it, but the despair lent me a strange recklessness. I answered with a slurred, "Hello?" A crisp, professional voice on the other end introduced herself as a spokesperson for Eclipse Talent. "Aiko-san, we are aware of your recent contractual difficulties. Our CEO is keenly interested in speaking with you about an immediate opportunity. He believes you have been treated unfairly, and he has a plan." I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. A plan? My contract is ironclad. Our CEO is very thorough in his research, the woman replied smoothly. He's asked you to meet him tomorrow, at noon, at Le Noir, in Shinjuku. We're eager to help you continue your passion. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. It was insane. A trap? Another predatory offer? So many scenarios ran in my head, each one more and more horrible. But that last bit, she said, "We're eager to help you continue your passion," ignited a tiny, desperate flame of motivation. The thought of sticking it to my sleazy former boss was intoxicating. I needed sleep, maybe a shower, and definitely a better dress. I had nothing left to lose. Chapter 2. The Mug of Dark Chocolate. I arrived at the upscale restaurant Le Noir, feeling distinctly out of place. I had scrubbed off the night's despair, but I still felt dishevelled and ran on a fading hangover headache, only made worse by the aching in my throat from last night's crying. The spokesperson led me to a private table. Waiting there was a man who looked deceptively young, perhaps my age, but carried an air of immense wealth and authority. Kaito. He was handsome, in a sculpted, slightly cool way, even though he was wearing casual street clothes. These were clearly expensive, and I instantly felt underdressed and intensely self-conscious. Kaito rose to shake my hand. His grip was firm, brief, and warm, but his dark eyes held a strange, almost bored focus. The moment I sat down, he slid a large, heavy mug across the dark wood table towards me. Its familiar scent caught me off guard, but I knew what it was before I even looked at it. It was filled with dark, rich, steaming hot chocolate. Making sure not to burn myself, I took a sip. I immediately felt the sweet taste of honey as it soothed my throat, followed by a warmth that relaxed my entire body. I could feel my shoulders and neck gradually loosening up. My headache began to dissipate. It was the perfect hangover medicine, and my absolute favorite treat since I was a child. He hadn't just scheduled a meeting. He had anticipated my disheveled state, my hangover, my need for comfort. Who was this man? It's a good medicine, Kaito said, his voice deep and entirely lacking the false pleasantries of the industry. Let's talk business. I recently acquired a new group, and I require a lead idol. A brilliant, experienced leader. I want you. I clutched the warm mug. I appreciate it, Kaito-san. But the contract, Sato-san's clause, prohibits me from accepting similar work for 5 years. Kaito didn't react. He reached for an expensive-looking bag and pulled out a crisp stack of papers, the exact base, unsigned contract my former employer used. Thorough research, he said simply, answering my unspoken question. He tapped a section near Article 6b. It forbids Aiko from taking jobs as an idol. He paused, looking directly into my eyes. Years before you signed that, you legally changed your name, correct? You changed it to Aiko to shield your adoptive parents from public scrutiny. I nodded slowly, stunned by the intimate detail. It was true. At first, my adoptive family seemed reluctant, perhaps thinking I was planning to renounce them or something. But they were kind, hard-working people, who quickly understood that I was doing it out of care. The loophole is this. You legally revert to your original name. Let's call you Haruka again. Your former contract only binds the person known as Aiko. Sato-san would have to prove in court that Haruka is the same person as Aiko, which would be difficult and expensive. He sat back. Even if the courts side with Sato-san, I have the capacity to delay the proceedings for so long that his legal losses would exceed any monetary gain. He would be forced to withdraw. Either way, you work, and he loses. The logic was flawless, ruthless, and intoxicating. It could have just been the scent of the hot chocolate, but, for a fleeting moment, a deep sense of familiarity tugged at my memory. Kaito-san, have we met before? He paused, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his expression. I don't know. I don't think we have, he finally said, his tone utterly flat. A fierce exhilaration surged through me. I finished the hot chocolate, feeling renewed. I accept, I said firmly. My name is Haruka. Let's stick it to him. Chapter 3. The group is born. The legal paperwork was a blur. Within 2 days, Aiko ceased to exist, and Haruka was reborn. When I told my parents who, if honest, I had not seen in quite some time, they were thrilled. They had long been worried that losing the name Haruka was an omen of me losing myself to this industry. The sheer thought never crossed my mind, but, in hindsight, they had not been that far off. My contract with Eclipse Talent was simple, generous, and shockingly fair. Kaito introduced me to the rest of the group. I was nervous about being the new, so-called experienced leader. I was preparing myself to encounter friction and the need to prove myself both stern and worthy in front of judgmental attitudes and egos. But I quickly met 4 beaming, nervous girls. Yuna, Mei, Rin, and Sana. The first to shake my hand was Yuna, with her neon pink hair tied high and the lean, wiry build of an acrobat. Despite her small stature, her energy was explosive, and her movements were already technically flawless. Mei, on the other hand, was the quiet elegance, a classical beauty, with long, dark hair and an analytical focus that made her seem older than her years. She moved with the natural grace of a seasoned performer, though she barely spoke. Rin was the radiant optimist, a bubbly vocalist with an infectious, gap-toothed grin and a voice that was surprisingly rich and powerful, capable of hitting any note I challenged her with. Finally, there was Sana, the youngest. She looked fragile and constantly nervous, but her eyes, large, dark, and serious, held a surprisingly fierce dedication that I immediately respected. I discovered the shocking truth. I wasn't joining an established group. I was the foundation of a brand new one. All the girls had been hired that week. They were talented, but had always been rejected by other agencies with generic answers like, "Not what we're looking for," or "We're going in a different direction." "I failed 3 times, Rin admitted, with a sheepish grin. "But Eclipse Talent called me right after the last audition. It felt like a miracle." The realization hit me with profound force. Kaito hadn't just created a spot for me. He had built an entire infrastructure around me. I should have been even more nervous. But somehow, that knowledge, the trust that they were putting in me, they washed away my fears. I embraced the role of leader. The younger girls were enthusiastic, respectful, and eager to learn. This company was nothing like the others. We received luxurious, free-of-charge training facilities, the industry's best coaches, and a dedicated team handling every logistical aspect. We thrived in the supportive environment, but Kaito remained the most fascinating puzzle. He was efficient and professional, running the company with ice-cold precision. Yet, his actions contradicted his demeanor. Every time the girls mentioned a need, it was met instantly and perfectly. "He's a textbook tsundere," Rin declared one afternoon, all of us sitting on the floor of the rehearsal room, sweaty and exhausted from practice. "A what?" I asked, confused. "A tsundere. You know, cold on the outside, but actually super caring on the inside." Mei giggled. "He's especially attentive to you, Haruka-senpai. He watches our rehearsal footage, but his feedback is always focused on your staging and comfort." Sana, the youngest, nodded. "The chocolate, and the contract. He risked everything to put you back on stage. He's totally smitten." I flushed, denying it, but the seeds of romantic possibility were sown. I couldn't shake the feeling that Kaito was a powerful, strange, protective force in my life. The group, christened Starlight Aegis, launched with a dazzling debut single. The success was immediate. We were a phenomenon. Part 2, Chapter 4, The Former Boss Attacks. Starlight Aegis became a runaway hit. Kaito ensured we constantly took gigs that had been previously secured by Sato's old agency. It was continuous professional revenge, and it felt satisfying. As expected, Sato-san launched his legal counterattack. His lawyers were good, but Kaito's strategy was better. The legal process dragged on, bogged down in motions and identity proofs. Sato was forced to hemorrhage money on lawyer fees just to prove a point. But Sato's patience wore thin, and his professionalism vanished. One evening, after a particularly intense choreography session, I stepped out of the rehearsal studio. Sato was waiting in the empty hallway, looking frantic and desperate. "Aiko! You snake! You think a little name change can fool me? I made you!" he spat. Before I could react, he lunged, gripping my forearm in a hard, painful vice. "You belong to me. I will see you ruined." I froze, adrenaline spiking. Suddenly, a shadow fell over us. Kaito was standing there. He hadn't made a sound. Without a word, Kaito moved. His hand shot out, grasping Sato's forearm with chilling precision. He twisted Sato's arm and wrist, just enough to produce a small, sickening pop. Sato gasped, released me immediately, and stumbled backward, clutching his arm. He stared at Kaito, recognizing the raw, dangerous intent in his eyes. Kaito said nothing, but his expression reminded me of a tiger about to launch at its victim. Terrified, Sato scrambled backward, sputtering useless threats, before turning and fleeing the building. I rubbed my throbbing arm. "Kaito-san, thank you," I whispered. "You saved me." Kaito's gaze softened infinitesimally as he looked at me. He briefly checked my arm. "You and the girls," he said, his voice low, "are under my protection." The intensity of the moment broke, and I burst into a nervous, grateful laugh. "That's so corny, Kaito-san." Kaito's lips twitched slightly, a rare shadow of a smile. "I suppose it is. But to me, the corny line was the sincerest declaration of devotion I had ever received. It was a promise backed by silent strength. Chapter 5. The White-Haired Boss. The revenge was not yet complete. Later that day, A squad of black luxury sedans pulled up to Sato's crumbling agency. Gossip-hungry former colleagues told me the story. No fewer than 10 lawyers entered Sato's office for a closed-door meeting that lasted exactly 3 hours. No one ever knew what was said, but when Sato emerged from his office, the transformation was shocking. His face was pale and drawn, and his usual slick, dark hair seemed somehow much whiter. He looked like he had aged 20 years. The meeting with his remaining staff was brief. He announced the immediate liquidation of the entire group. He released all the idols from their contracts, with no strings attached, and even gave them generous monetary compensation packages. Sato-san was never heard from again. For me, it was the ultimate, instantaneous victory. Kaito had ensured the antagonist was erased completely. He didn't just win, he destroyed the entire playing field and rebuilt it in my favor. I found myself focusing on the subtle warmth beneath Kaito's cold exterior. Every shared glance, every perfect scheduling decision, every instance of dark chocolate appearing in the break room when I looked tired, felt like a deliberate act of affection. The air between us was growing thicker, the mystery of who he was only deepening my attraction. All of that, unfortunately, had to wait as the focus of the group shifted from professional rivalry to personal safety. Chapter 6. The Stalker and the Duke. One day, I noticed Sana, the youngest, leaving the rehearsal room very early in the morning, looking exhausted and unusually disheveled, as if she had only just gotten out of bed. As soon as she noticed me, she became nervous, as if caught doing something wrong. She confessed that a malicious stalker had found and published her address. Too frightened to stay alone, but unsure if she could tell anyone, she had been sleeping on the mats in the rehearsal room. When Kaito heard the news, his face turned to granite. "This will be handled immediately," he stated, his voice dangerously low. He dismissed his security team with a series of clipped, specific orders. Within the hour, the security team had tracked the stalker. Kaito insisted on a private, immediate action. When his team left, he went along, apparently taking the lead himself. I later heard he and his detail tracked the man, cornered him, and delivered him, along with overwhelming, irrefutable evidence, to the police precinct. Kaito didn't stop there. He declared that all 5 of us would be relocated immediately. That evening, we were moved into a cluster of high-security, luxury apartments, in a complex managed directly by Kaito. It was an extravagant, overkill response, but it made us feel utterly, completely safe. I realized Kaito was not a simple CEO. He was a gatekeeper, shielding us from the darkness. The constant, protective attention, the vast resources he could instantly deploy, the way he had elevated me and the girls from obscurity to safety and fame, crystallized an earlier thought. He was like one of those powerful dukes in novels who rescue a girl from poverty and turns her into a rich, desired woman. A corny, simplistic idea perhaps, but corniness could very well be something else we had in common. The metaphorical comparison accelerated our relationship. I stopped fighting the feeling that I had met him before. I started seeking him out after rehearsals. The short, professional meetings lengthened into private, tentative dinners, where our intimacy began to blossom, built on trust, gratitude, and the undeniable history I felt humming between us. Part 3, Chapter 7. The Revelation. My relationship with Kaito reached a critical peak. The unspoken affection was ready to become a tangible commitment. I was the happiest I had ever been. Then, the news broke. It was a massive, international investigation into financial crimes involving one of Japan's most powerful corporate families. Kaito's family. Major arrests were imminent. Bankruptcy was guaranteed, and severe penalties were expected. And there, deep in the exposé, was the devastating detail. The investigation had been triggered by an internal whistleblower who had provided comprehensive evidence. The article named him only as the adopted son, who was now expected to lose everything. The word struck me like a thunderclap. Adopted son, le noir, the dark chocolate, the fierce, silent protection. The fragmented memories rushed together. I closed my eyes, the world spinning as I was plunged back, 15 years into the past. Orphanage, Kyoto. 15 years ago, I was 6, a fiery little thing, and he was 5, small for his age, with eyes that seemed permanently rimmed with red. But back then, his name was Akira, and he had lost his parents and his home within a single, brutal month. He didn't just cry, he was silent, withdrawn, constantly seeking a dark corner. I felt a fierce, primal instinct to shield him. He was mine to look after. I remembered the cold winter day when the older boys, merciless and bored, had snatched his only toy, a chipped wooden train. I hadn't hesitated. I flew at them, not caring that they were twice my size. I was all elbows and teeth, a furious little warrior fighting for my small charge. When the caretaker finally pulled me off, Akira was clutching the train, staring up at me, his small face streaked with snot and tears, but his eyes wide with awe. "Don't cry, Akira," I'd ordered, my own knees scraped and bloody. "I'll protect you, always." Our sanctuary was the supply closet, and our sacred ritual was the dark chocolate. We would sneak in, steal a spoonful of the cheap powdered cocoa the kitchen used for baking, mix it with hot water, and share the single, chipped mug, passing it back and forth, as if it were a chalice of life. It was bitter, muddy, and tasted like safety. It was our secret, a warm wall against the orphanage's cold despair. Then, the rich family arrived. They looked like royalty to our young eyes, impeccable, severe, and clearly displeased of being there. They weren't looking for a troubled 5-year-old. They were looking for an heir, and they chose Akira. The last time I saw him, he was sitting on a cold bench in the reception hall, clutching my hand so tightly it hurt. "They're making me change my name," he had whispered, his eyes huge with panic. "They say the name Akira is too plain. They want to erase everything about me." I felt so powerless back then. All orphans want to be adopted, but this didn't feel right. That family didn't feel right. "Don't worry," I had promised, not knowing what else to say. "No matter what name they give you, I will find you. I'll always know you, Akira." I too was adopted not long after. My family took good care of me, and, faster than I'd like to admit, I moved on with my life. I opened my eyes, my heart beating faster, and my stomach twisting. Kaito wasn't some fantasy duke. He was Akira. He remembered everything, and in the years since, he had become the powerful man he needed to be to maintain the promise that I could not. He knew about the dark chocolate because we used to drink it together. He knew my original name, Haruka. He hadn't been an aloof CEO. He was a protector, executing a long-planned strategy for both our salvation and his revenge. Chapter 8. The Heart to Heart. I found Kaito in his private office, staring out the window. The facade of cold professionalism was entirely gone, replaced by a weary resignation. "Akira," I said softly, using his original name. He didn't flinch. He just turned, his dark eyes, recognizing the truth in mine. "Haruka." I walked to him, not as his employee, but as his equal. "It was you, the orphanage, the dark chocolate, all of it." He nodded, a heavy weight lifting from his shoulders. "When I heard about you being fired, it felt as if we were back in that orphanage, like they were doing to you what they did to me. Erasing you like you hadn't mattered seemed like a good time to step in." I wrapped my arms around him, placed my head on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have found you, like I said I would." "You did find me. I just needed to make it a bit easier for you." "What about your family?" I asked. "They say you're the one who got them all arrested." His answer had no hint of remorse, only the calm of someone stating facts he'd come to terms a long time ago. "They're scum. Each and every one of them. I was basically trapped all these years, being treated like I was trash while they walked me into someone they could use to continue their family name and ambitions. So, I did everything they said. Every dirty dealing. Every shady move. Every awful crime. I also happened to keep very detailed notes of everything around me while doing it. So when they lowered their guard, I had a long, well-documented story to tell the authorities. This way, I'd hit them where it hurts the most. This way, they'll lose everything that they truly care about." "And you?" I asked. the fear returning. I'll go bankrupt too. My entire personal fortune is inextricably linked to their holdings. I'll lose everything I've built here, he admitted, his voice rough. But I made sure the assets connected to Eclipse Talent and the security contracts for Starlight Aegis are fully insulated. They're safe. You and the girls are safe. That's all that matters. He looked utterly defeated. A powerful man who had just traded a kingdom for an honest life and the return of his soul, even if it meant ruin. No, I said, lifting my head, my voice ringing with newfound authority. You've protected me long enough, Akira. Now it's my turn. Chapter 9. Under her protection. I didn't wait for him to object. I immediately called my lawyers and the chief financial officer of Eclipse Talent. My plan was bold and perfectly matched to his own ruthless strategies. First, I arranged for the rapid, complex, legal transfer of all the insulated Eclipse Talent assets, the studio, the security company, the apartments to my own name, Haruka, as the sole, independent owner. I was completely untainted by the financial investigation, so the assets would be shielded. Next, Akira legally completed his final act of rebellion. He changed his name back to Akira. The man named Kaito ceased to exist. Finally, the masterstroke. We're getting married, I announced 2 days later, presenting him with the required documents. Akira was stunned. Haruka, I'm about to be destitute. I can't offer you anything. I'll be a liability. That's the point, I countered, a fierce, protective light in my eyes. I'm not marrying a CEO. I'm marrying Akira. And I'm not asking you for anything. I'm offering you everything. The marriage was quiet, rushed, and legally binding. My adoptive parents agreed to be the witnesses, without hesitation. The moment I introduced Akira to them, they welcomed him as a son. By marrying me, Akira automatically gained full, legal, marital protection under my financial umbrella. He went from being the adopted son facing ruin to the legal husband of Haruka, the wildly successful lead of Starlight Aegis, and the sole owner of Eclipse Talent. We had reversed the roles of our first meeting. He had rescued me from ruin by giving me my old name and a contract. I had rescued him from ruin by giving him back his true name and my protection. As I signed the final marriage certificate, I looked into his eyes, now warm and full of tears. Welcome home, Akira, I whispered. You are officially under my protection. Epilogue. The househusband. A year passed. I was brilliant, as the public face of the entire operation. I gave interviews, led the group, and signed major deals. To the outside world, I was a powerhouse, the young idol who had beaten the system and become a CEO. But in reality, I wasn't alone. Akira, now my househusband, watched from the sidelines. He had settled into the role of silent consultant, financial advisor, and tactical strategist. He handled my private investment portfolio, managed the security detail for the girls, and discreetly offered advice that was always a decade ahead of the competition. He never sought the spotlight. He was happy making dinner, ensuring my schedule was manageable, and finally, simply being Akira. One evening, I returned home after a triumphant concert. I found Akira in the kitchen, meticulously preparing my favorite meal. The aroma of rich, dark chocolate was brewing on the stove. How was the show, CEO Haruka? He asked, smiling warmly. The inexpressive, cold CEO persona, having long vanished alongside Kaito. A success, househusband Akira, I replied, kissing him deeply. I just finished the paperwork. I'm giving the lead position to Sana. Sana, the girl who had been sleeping in the rehearsal room, had flourished under my mentorship. She was ready for the next level of stardom. A wise decision, Akira commented, pouring 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She's earned it. She will lead the second generation with grace. I took my mug, the familiar, comforting warmth settling in my hands. I looked at Akira, my husband, my childhood protector, and now the man I fiercely protected in return. It's time for the third generation, I said, my voice soft with promise. We had been talking about it for a while, the idea of having children. We decided that first I had to conclude my role as an idol, and only after I felt like my career had gone as far as I felt it could, with no lingering regrets, should we take the next step. I guess he didn't expect me to reach that point so soon. Akira's eyes widened with understanding. He set his mug down, wrapping me in his arms, lifting me, and making us spin, as if we were dancing. The empire we built was secure, and now, our own future was finally ready to begin. If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories, twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.